Are we really exaggerating the usage of technology? Or another question that comes to my mind is, are we putting, are we in some sort of a rush to put technology to the use in all the aspects of HR? These are the questions that are keeping me awake in the middle of night. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day we're going to get answer to some of these questions, because I have a super privilege today to be hosting a renowned psychiatrist, international figure, Dr. who brings to the table experience with a unique combination of understanding the human mind and technology. 2 decades he's worked with NHS UK, and being a Hyderabadi at heart, he could not keep himself away from technology. Yes, he actually did his MSc IT program, and guess what? He's actually helped hospitals in UK build IT infrastructure. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, presenting Dr. Praveen.
Thank you very much, Meg. It's such a privilege to be here, and it's a fantastic thought. With the changing times and the technology perhaps being there in every part of our life, the IoTs and everything talks to everything technically with bytes and bits. I think it's an interesting space to talk about these things.
Super. Praveen, I'm sorry, you have told me to address you as Praveen.
Please call me Praveen.
Thank you. So Praveen, we are in the 21st century, and we've already seen phones are already gone wireless. Cars are already keyless. Cooking is fireless, and we've also seen tires are going tubeless. Question that's staring at HR community is, are we going emotionless? Or let me come to the point. At your clinic, as a professional psychiatrist, what kind of trends are you seeing in corporate citizens or corporate for the matter visiting your clinics? Would love to know some trends from you.
I mean, what happens is traditional psychiatry has been dealing with this Bandon's, major schizophrenia and bipolar illness. That was the general scenario, but the trends are changing, not just in my own service, like Tranquil Minds, but we get to see it, globally. Anxiety is more common, depression is more common, and people finding it difficult to cope and find time for themselves and time to reflect upon or contemplate. I think this leads to a huge burden, and we almost feel like we are tethered, almost like there is a mobile phone stitched onto a hand or stitched onto a body, and we are in a continuous connected world. I think that's a scary bit, and not being able to pause leads to all these new forms of stress, inability to manage work-work balance or life-life balance or work-life balance, however people might want to use this phrase. This is leading to lots of dissatisfaction, difficulty to cope in day-to-day things. That's a major, major scenario now.
Well, Praveen, thanks for sharing that trend. Interesting thing is what audience would like to know, and what personally I would like to know is, what's the root cause? I mean, we heard you say that it's mobile stitched to the hand. I don't know whether that's the only culprit, but what's the root cause? I mean, we're already witnessing that our conversations mostly are happening on text, our arguments are happening on phone, and our emotions are being displayed on the wall and on the social media. So are we really building interactive walls? How does, as a HR community, we should be understanding the root cause for the trends that you just shared?
I wish there was a single root cause. We are in a transiting and rapidly transiting society. India is not the same as it was 10 years ago. It's not the same it was 5 years ago. And every day we are in a transiting society. The family structures are changing. And there is this new urbanization. It wasn't the past urbanization, which we used to say there was a city and people used to migrate and work, and like in Mumbai or Delhi or something like that. But there is this new cluster of urbanization, which makes people feel pretty rootless. I go into this place, there is sense of what Durkheim used to call anomie, that sense of loss of identity. And add to that, the family structure is fragmenting, and there is a sense of dehumanization in the whole process. I want to dump my girlfriend, I use Facebook. I don't want to really pick up the phone and say like, I'm sorry, mate, it's not working out between us. Or like, my wife wants to inform me that the lunch is ready. She wants to send a WhatsApp message. So this technology taking away the human interaction, the emotion, the empathy, the connect. I think technology is an enabler, but it's a bad master. And that's, I think it's time to pause and revisit perhaps.
That's a wonderful thought. I mean, actually, while you were speaking, I was interrupted by a ping. And as you all know, it's a live session, and I already have my first question, which is very interesting. And it's a nice interruption and a welcome interruption, I would say. It's a gentle reminder for all the audience. Keep shooting your questions. This is an interesting question that has come up on WhatsApp. And the question that has come is, so do you actually want HR community to slow down on the adoption of technology? Well, that's the question. To also rephrase something in my mind is it, I'm actually confused. Is it like to save time, you can't just stop your watch?
Indeed.
So what's your take on this? Should HR community, and that's the question audience is asking, that, should HR really slow down on technology?
It's a very tempting and very quick solution as it appears, but I don't think that's how things should work. Technology is a great enabler. Say if I have to mop my floor, if I have a robotic hoover or a cleaner, it takes care of cleaning the floor in my absence. I think that's a great thing. And it gives me more time to perhaps spend time with my children. If technology does the bits and bobs which HR has to do on a routine, mundane basis, like the day-to-day things of screening, appraisals, getting your pay scales, whatever, this number crunching things, like a calculator does a job better, but calculator cannot talk to me. Calculator cannot feel. A computer, an artificial intelligence, however clever it might be, it's not going to say like, if I'm going to tell my HR and then say like, my HR boss, like, I'm going through a bit of a tough time. And how is this AI going to say, tough means hard in what sense? Tough in a physical hard sense? Or actually I'm going through emotional pain? How is it going to decipher the nuance? How it's going to decipher the understanding at a greater level? I don't think my artificial intelligence is ever going to be my HR person who has seen the same movies as I've seen. If I crack a joke, like, it feels like, that movie wherein this guy is very gloomy. I feel like the Rain Man. How is the AI going to understand? I think the mundane day-to-day things wherein there is no thought involved. But when it comes to feelings, I don't think you should adopt about the feeling tone. Thinking tone, fine. The feelings, the emotion, the human empathic touch, I think that's where HR, if these little bits and bobs are taken care, you guys will have more time to actually talk to people at a human level.
Wonderful. That's, I'm a kind of engineer who got into HR. We love some thumb rules and some prescriptions. Something, while you drove a point that relationship building and empathy has to be in the DNA of every HR professional.
Yes.
And my question is, what about the Gen Z, when millennials are walking to the workplace? Is socialization at workplace or affiliation at workplace, is that really their anchor? And because you must be getting a lot of these millennials walking to your clinic, would love to know your thoughts, because the research says that, if a human being is kept in isolation for 48 hours, one can lose his mind. And that's why I would love to know from a pro like you.
The assumption that workplaces are sterile like operation theaters, wherein people go, do their job, and then go home. Tum kaam karne aaye ho, maza karne nahi. Why should work be not pleasure? If I go to work and if I engage in a meaningful social engagement wherein I find purpose and a sense of identity for what I do and exist on this planet, significant amount of my waking time is spent at work. and you say you need to be emotionless, you need to come and do a job, you are like a resource. I mean, that takes away the humanity of your sheer existence. 8 hours ke liye, whatever, or 40 hours of contract per week, you're not a human. You're a process thingy. You're a tool in the system. You're a cog in the wheel, a cog in the whole system. I think that dehumanizes the whole thing. People don't go to work like in the past, perhaps like, 40 years ago, people used to think of work as a source of your earning. You pay your bills, you feed your children, you try to have a roof over the head. I think people are looking for higher meaning. If my company writes code, I want to be the part of the bigger picture. What does my company do? If my company makes cars, I want my mark on that car. I want to sign the final product. I want the younger generation wants their story, their life story, to be engaged with the employee as well as the HR, because I want you to be part of my narrative. When I write my story, I want you to be part of my story. And like, you cannot really say like, I should be a feelingless, toneless, robotic, existent person. I think it brings in lots of existential crisis as it's shown. Workplaces are human places.
Wonderful. Praveen, we have an interesting question that's come up. And the question is, how HR can battle anxiety and depression in employees?
I think it's a very beautiful question, because we tend to see lots and lots of depression amongst young men and women, and things seem to be fragmenting. The sense of identity of self, it seems to be leaky, broken, and you find like, the hordes of people who come in this cabs and buses, and you find the humanity not enjoying actually. These guys stuck to their phones and headphones, they either sleep in the cabs or they're looking at the phone, and there is no human engagement at all. And I'm sure I'm sure HR does make a lot of effort to get people together, feel this human sense of existence, but that's a major thing. And it is the need of the hour for a cultural shift to identify that depression happens. And when when a young employee doesn't perform as he or she used to perform in the past, perhaps the first question is like, आपका performance appraisal है से ज़्यादा तुम ठीक हो? Are you fine? Are you okay? Is there anything I could do? Rather than, oh God, I mean, your performance last year is 20% down, you've coded 200 lines less. I think that has to shift. The first question perhaps is, are things okay? And is everything okay at home? Is there something I could do? And I might not have answers. If you feel like, come and have a chat. Have an unconditional space created within the organization wherein people can come, talk, without having to be judged. People get worried when they go and talk to HR. अगर मैं depressed बोला तो HR मेरे records पे लिख देंगे. That's there. People are worried. I mean, they would want to go and talk to a stranger. They want to go and pay a psychiatrist or psychotherapist a certain amount of money, when these spaces can be created verily within their own existent support structures. I think that's the need of that change in culture, creating these unconditional spaces and an empathic hearing. That's the beginning to start to deal with anxiety and depression.
Praveen, today HR is making all its efforts to go strategic, and we are actually linking our KPIs with the business outcome. If affiliations and socialization needs of employees are taken care, we would like to know, as HR community, will it help us increase the productivity and engagement?
I don't want to catch up with this story of happy employees, a productive employee. I think an employee who's engaged and truly plugged in with the organization, that's where things start to happen, rather than alienate the employee as a resource versus the management versus the bottom line. I think measuring an outcome of the organization based on the amount of money they make or the production they are into, I think that's like putting the sort of cart before the horse. You need to look at more of employee engagement in an unconditional way. And perhaps happiness is something which can be aimed at, and the levels of happiness which we aim at within the organization, they can vary. But providing that unconditional space and an engaging space with the employee leads to increase in bottom line naturally. I don't think it needs a psychiatrist or it needs, Taylor to come in and say, Nobel laureate in economics who says, engaged employer. I think that's the key.
Well, you actually are an extended part of HR family, so that really helps. Moving on from KPIs for HR to KPIs for an individual as an employee, is there a word called total well-being? I mean, why talk about just workplace? If you see employee even outside of workplace, they are interacting with the devices all the time. So as a HR community, how we should be doing our bit in this total well-being, and if that word exists, would love to know your take on this.
Excuse me. I'm glad you've coined the word total well-being. I think that goes to Meg Risaldar coining total well-being. I think that's very, very important because we are not fragments. I'm not Praveen the working person, Praveen the husband, Praveen the father, Praveen whatever. These roles are comprehensive. I'm an individual and I do certain roles from time to time. I do a certain job. And when people say work-life balance, trying to create this watershed compartments like work ye hota hai, life ye hota hai, I think gone are the days. There is nothing like work-life balance and this new term like work-life integration. I think gone are the days of work-life integration. There is nothing like work and life. I mean, there's a significant chunk of people within your organizations, they work from home. And they might be changing the nappies. I mean, the kids' nappies in between. I might have a toddler at home and I might be changing the nappy while still at work. And I might be doing certain other things. And then when I believe that work is not something which is separate, which the work which I do gives me that sense of identity, pride, and indulgence and involvement. At the same time, my life is fulfilling at the same time. My work should not be a hindrance that I cannot take my kids to the park because I'm working. Denmark is a good model wherein people are trying to reduce the number of work hours, true work hours in business sense. So when there is importance given to whole life rather than fragmented parts of life, I think that's when things change. That's when total well-being comes in. So people trying to create this watertight compartments, I think that's a dangerous precedence. People trying to separate the spaces and treat individual fragments of people as separate entities, I think that's when the problem takes place. Treat people as a whole and treat them with empathic concern. I think that's where things change.
I have an interesting question. In fact, it's not a question, it's a comment that has come up and I'll link a question to that. The comment I have has come from one of the member company is HR is already, on a lighter note, HR is already known for making a remark, we'll get back to you. And HR is actually working hard to get away from that image and really get real time. And that's how to wash out that image. We have to use technology. The question related to that is, do you think that, while we are trying to strike a balance between high tech and high touch, is there a kind of a Lakshman Rekha that we have to draw between high tech and high touch, to what an extent we can go?
Wherever there is no feeling involved, probably technology can take care of it. How many more casual leaves do I have? I think a chatbot can take care of it. I mean, you have 12 leaves left, you've used so many leaves, and am I entitled for sick leave? Yes, you are entitled for sick leave. These sort of things, perhaps. It doesn't need much of a brain or a heart, but when it's a concern of the heart, when I'm saying I'm troubled by my manager, or when I'm saying I don't feel great within the organization, or when I'm presenting with absenteeism more often without reasonable grounds, I think I'm screaming out loud, somebody talk to me. And I don't want a chatbot to tell me, are you okay? The text which is scribbled on the screen. No, I don't want to talk to a chatbot. However clever, however intelligent it could be, AI might be able to do whatever things it might be, it's never going to feel. It's never going to feel the way a HR person feels honestly. And I should tell you, when I went to UK in 1998, that was my first job in UK as a doctor. And I met my first HR person. I still remember her name. Her name is Sheila. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use the second name, but Sheila was this retired person working in HR. So she was about 62 years old. And she made me so welcome. And she says, Dr. Kumar, I mean, is there something I could do to make you feel welcome? And is there anything I could do to, make your life a bit better? That was my first I landed in England on a pretty cold winter day. And probably I wasn't prepared. I always thought warm clothes, like it's not warm, not thandi kabhi sochi nahi. So this warm person makes you feel welcome. I think HR is the interface of the organization. HR is the person I would talk to. That's what an organization means to me when I go. So HR, when I tell my story today, HR is part of my story. I still remember Sheila. I still remember Maura, who I spoke to when I spoke to her from India before I left the UK. So these are all people who are part of my story. If I write a book, if I write a biography, these names are there in my biography. So that's what HR is about. If there was a chatbot, I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have raised the names even.
But there was a question that we got early on while we were propagating about this webinar, that how critical it is for today as HR community, how critical it is for us to be remembered by our first name. Should that be a part of our KPI?
Say it's not about remembering Meg Risaldar as Meg as HR person who's part of my story, but the experience, the engagement, and the conversation, and the depth of conversation, and the meaningful relationship I had with this HR person when I met them for the first time. The anxious first time interaction with HR, or even if it could be an exit interview, but the relationship and the sense of meaning and the worth or value which HR poses in me when I join, when I'm with them, and when I'm leaving. All these phases, HR becomes a part of my narrative. I think that's the whole point, the meaningfulness and the true, honest, unconditional relationship. I think that's what matters more.
I don't know whether it's a Friday effect, but because there was, when at Free Thinkers Adda, we were debating on which day is a better day for conducting this webinar. And I think people took a decision to conduct it on a Friday, and that's the right decision because we have a question coming up. This is an interesting question. Question is a degree in psychology the new must-haves for HR professional? That's
lovely
a googly
question. Lovely question. I think this is fascinating. Guys, I mean, I would say you don't need a degree in psychology. I think caring about somebody, that's what matters the most, and being human. I think the human resources is beyond being human resources. It's being humane, being unconditional, and respect for the individual, being kind, and being positive. I think these are the things which we prominently look at. I don't think you need a degree in psychology or psychiatry. I think these are all these are add-ons rather than being good to people, treating them with respect. I think these are the key things. And when we do psychotherapy, when we talk to people in psychotherapy, apart from the few techniques we use, there is this continuous effort to say unconditional positive regard. Mm-hmm. I think if you can provide that, I think that's what it's needed. And you can see HR people, when people tell about organizations, they tell about HR people, how beautiful their engagement was. When I met this person, he opened the door for me, he took me inside, and he opened the door for me when I left the door. I think that's what people remember. And this guy wasn't condescending. Are yaar, I'm feeling low. Oh, pull your socks up. Are sabko hota hai. No, I mean, oh, that must be tough. Instead of trying to come out with answers, there might not be answers for many of the questions which employees bring into their HR teams. But being there to listen, I think that's the key. Great listening skills, unconditional space, that's the key.
Uh-huh. Praveen, I must think fact. In spite of being an engineer, I had applied for admission to psychology program, and back then, IGNOU syllabus as part of the eligibility never had B as a qualification.
I know.
And you must know that my application was rejected just on that count that engineers are not eligible to apply for this program. Friends, situation has changed now, but that was the case in 1995. Well, talking about qualification, Praveen, we're keen to know with the tech wave that we are witnessing, what kind of soft skills which are going to become must have in next 4 or 5 years?
As you say, like, if artificial intelligence takes away the mundane jobs or the number crunching jobs or number crunching part of HR piece of work, I think you'll be left with more time to engage with employees in a productive way, creating more happy employees, creating meaningful relationship with the organization, and help individuals grow as they grow along the organization, while without organization as well. I think mentorship skills, human spaces, great listening skills, and unconditionality. I think these are going to be great. And of course, psychology does help, because understanding human mind, when people come in and say, like, the transcultural things, like, even within Hyderabad setting, a person who comes from Charminar area thinks differently when he expresses a certain thing. Kya mama sab theek hai, bole to it means very different thing from, Madhapur gai mama, I don't know. That it varies. I mean, the word mama means different things across cultures, even within a tiny space like Hyderabad city. So if we are going to be a global world, to understand cultures, to understand euphemisms, to understand the idioms of expression, to understand the emotional spaces, these are going to be great skills. And not just understanding, perhaps working towards a solution with the individual and not generating solutions on their behalf. Take 7 days off. No, that's not going to be a solution. Perhaps working with the individual to grow from inside so that they can learn to fish. I think that's going to be the key. So the gamut of HR is going to be very, very different as we go along. We're not far from it. Probably we are only like 5-10 years from this new skills, new experiences, and new relationships are going to emerge.
Wonderful. I make a statement that, I mean, you spoke about growth, and if I make a statement in that context, that while organizations are growing, employees are feeling alone and left out. Would you agree with this statement?
Yes. Depends on whether organizations grow vertically or horizontally or numbers wise or production wise. Growth of an organization means different things, I'm sure, for different organizations.
Yes.
But the larger the size of the organization, the more the sense of rootlessness. I'm not feeling grounded. I don't know what my organization does at a bigger scale. If my company makes cars, that's a crude example. But if I don't know where my job fits into making this beautiful car which comes out of the production line, where I cannot find my signature on that, that's the sense of loss of identity. Because you are treated like, oh, you are quality control, you are quality department, or you are, women empowerment department, or you are HR department. No, there is a common gamut, there is a common goal which organization works towards, and we're all part of that. I think once that sense of belongingness goes, I think that's when people feel rootless, helpless, and enemy sets in. That's when people feel depressed, and what we call as the existential vacuum sets in. There is a vacuum inside yourself because you don't fit in, or you don't feel you fit in.
But bitter truth that employees are actually feeling left alone. Is that a correct statement to make? I mean, I don't want to generalize, but it won't be an incorrect statement either.
They will grow. That's the nature of it. Some die, some grow, some. I mean, and every organization, like an individual, You have an infancy, you have childhood, you have adolescence, you have the adult period and the elderly period, and then they either mature out or they get acquired or they acquire somebody else. That's
Right.
the life cycle of an organization. And depending on where you are within the life cycle of the organization as an individual, I think that's what matters. And when the organization is at the peak, I think that's going to be a very different experience wherein you feel like, wow, I'm going with the flow, sab kuch chal raha hai, everything is happening to me. Like, I touch something, it becomes gold, the Midas touch. And then when the organization starts sliding down and it's closer to acquiring or acquisition phase, I think that's when people feel pretty helpless because the organization is horizontally, like, very widely spread out. You have multiple sites, multiple people, vertical heads and all those things. I think that's when people feel let out, but that's the nature of it. And perhaps employees and employers need to understand, the organizations need to understand that the culture has to change. Culture, it's time. I think, we need to redefine the cycle of an organization, and that's going to happen even. We are not going to, I think 20 years from now, we're not going to have this huge sort of structures like, whatever, I don't name the companies like, you have like monopolies and duopolies.
Right.
I think, or at the most tripolies. So that's not going to be the case. I think monopolies are going to end. It's not a socialist point of view, but it's not great for organizations. It's not great for humanity either to have this monopolies and duopolies.
Well, Praveen, that sounds perfect, prescription from a pro. While with this, we can take care of, how not to let employee feel alone or left alone. We are not too far from a situation where robots are going to be our co-workers, or even robot could become our bosses. How do you want HR community to get ready for it?
Beautiful question. When we were growing up, we were reading all these stories, like, robots would be in every house, they'll be sweeping, mopping, and, taking care of the babies and cuddling them putting them to bed every night. I think and there'll be flying cars everywhere. I think I haven't seen a flying car. That was the hope. 2000 tak hoga, okay, 2018, abhi tak the flying car dikhai nahi. But the thing is, there is this huge thing about sentience, the sense of identifying that I exist. As the French philosopher says, René Descartes says, like, I think, therefore I am. And if you go further, I feel, therefore I am, and understanding that I am a being. I think when that sentience happens, it leads to a lot of different experience. I can't see robots being colleagues because they don't have that sense of sentience. If you go to Star Wars, the R2-D2 robot, it has its own personality, but it's still a robot. Or you go to Star Trek, the Data in the Star Trek, the assumption that you work along with that, I think it's never going to happen because however intelligent a robot or any being which is created will be as good as the creator can be. And the experiences which can be fed into to create that sort of intelligence is going to be limited by the experience of the individual who is going to create that understanding. And a data-driven model, however clever it is, however sophisticated it is, it's not going to replace a human experience. How can a robo experience my mother's touch on my hand? How can a robo experience a HR person opening the door and puts the hand on the shoulder of an employee and says, "Theek hai, we'll take care of things. Don't worry, things will be fine." Or how can a robotic device or robo experience the distress I experience when my loved one is unwell? And I come and talk to you. And I say, like, Meg, I need to rush today because I think, I need to attend to my father. He seems to be a bit in a bad shape. And the first thought which goes into your Meg's mind is his thoughts about his father.
Right.
How did I react when I was going through? A robot cannot make a decision or experience the same resonance.
Right.
The emotional resonance which can be experienced at a human level. The assumption that robots can be taking care of that, I think that's going to be, I can't see it happening in my lifetime, perhaps in my children's lifetime, and not in the near future, or far future even. And robots being colleagues? I don't think so. Robots are going to be enablers, they're going to be tools rather than, I think getting beyond the tool model to an individual model, I think you cannot equate it to be individuals. You cannot have a robotic boss, you cannot have a robotic, how should I put it, employee, you cannot have a robotic colleague. I don't think that's possible. That's me. I mean,
Well, interesting question from the audience. We are talking about robots, and question is, while we've heard interesting, I would not say interesting, but story about Amazon firing its robot for discrimination. The question is about, what sort of litmus test that we should put these processes through and automation through to avoid these bias patterns and issues like data privacy.
To let you know, I used to be the data guardian for a while for NHS health data. So we were very, very protective of the health data. And we had this thing, when the paper records were there, we used to put it in a place called an iron mountain. That's what it was called.
Correct.
So data is something which is very private to us. And a robot cannot decide what is relevant, what is not relevant, and what sort of insights I could draw from a certain amount of data. Like yesterday's Jimmy Kimmel show, he was saying Amazon knows how much whatever I buy. If I buy, say young lady goes and buys like more healthy foods, stops buying tobacco, then she could be pregnant. So the insights which are drawn from data, they might be accurate, but they might not be meaningful at a human level because they are at risk of exploitation by the people who control the data. Two, if an organization creates a glass ceiling for women, a robot is going to put steeper ceilings, much lower, because it's going to amplify the effect of the intelligence you've already created.
True.
If an organization creates a glass cliff wherein women are brought into, when organizations start going down, women are brought in. I don't want to name the companies, but women were brought in when the companies, like even in India, some banks did that. When banks were going down under, women were brought in as leaders, and then banks go down under, blame the woman. So your robotic intelligence, your AI, is going to amplify the effect because it's as good as the data it's fed into.
Agreed.
So if it has Thomas as the first name, it's likely to select you, then Lisa. So Meg is going to get selected, then probably Padma, because that's what it's been taught. So you cannot assume robots to be unbiased, because it's going to amplify your personal bias. And there is no reflecting for the artificial intelligence, like, this is something which is going wrong, I need to look into it. Because if I have a gender stereotype, or if I have a race stereotype, or if I have a cultural stereotype of some sort, somebody can come and tell me, look at it, mate, I mean, you've used certain word which is not appropriate, and I correct myself and I ensure that it doesn't happen. But if the huge pool of data says, people are still using this word, a race stereotype or gender stereotype, your data intelligence will still feel it's appropriate, it's okay to do that. So the insights which humans draw are much, much meaningful rather than an AI drawing insights. Accuracy probably yes, but meaningful insights, no.
But probably as HR and probably even finance gets exposed to a lot of confidential data, and HR from a data privacy perspective, are these two departments, finance and HR, going to be late in adopting the chatbot evolution?
We looked at, I don't know if you know about Hans. Hans is a health epidemiologist from Sweden. He used to teach health epidemiology. And he realized that when people select stocks, they've got this artificial intelligence selecting stocks, and they've got these 3 monkeys to select the stocks.
Wow.
And then they've got these 3 clever guys to select the stocks. Guys or women or whatever, 3 very clever people. And these monkeys throw darts onto the board. And these 3 clever people throw darts onto this. And this artificial intelligence selects the thing. And monkeys were always right.
Whoa.
So the random effects of a system naturally works inherently towards a healthy, meaningful existence and growth, and humanity by default is altruistic. They want to help each other because it's good for humanity. A data-driven artificial intelligence model cannot replace beyond randomness. So an active, meaningful effort in an altruistic and empathic fashion will lead to better growth any day, rather than asking an AI to pick your stocks or a monkey to throw darts. I think it has to be done in an overt, nicer way.
One that gives us a legal perspective. From an emotional perspective, I mean, we know there are audits like stress audits, which can get me the pulse of the stress level in the organization. That tools exist. Is there something called as emotional audit? And how HR can, if emotional audits can be done, how HR can take a lead from there to create a roadmap for HR?
I do believe there is a need for looking at well-being of an individual beyond the physical checks you do. I think HR does dish out annual physical checks for everyone. And have you ever thought of looking at an emotional check for any of your employees? And have you as HR gone for an emotional checkup? Like, am I well? And did HR ask its employee, are you okay? So there is this huge impetus on, a fit ticking heart, but there is no effort to keep the mind ticking healthy. I think the shift has to happen. We need to look beyond the blood test which we ask our employees to do. It's time to look into the minds for their sake and look at it non-judgingly. And also not just that, that emotion is connected to every bit of life. If I am stressed out, I'm likely to develop an ulcer, my diabetes is going to get bad. Or if somebody's got thyroid, that's going to get awkward. And somebody's got skin conditions, they get worse when, when people get depressed. And their health goes haywire. And their hypertension goes whatever uncontrolled. So mind and body are not two different things. Perhaps to club this physical health checks and emotional health checks together. Is there a tool to start with? Talk to every employee. Every employee needs to talk to the HR at some point in this thing, and not just a physical appraisal process. Ki aapka tankha bada 10% nahi. Aapka man bada 10%, that's the key. And countries like Bhutan, they do happiness indices. So they're happy people. They don't have that sort of wealth, but they're happy. And some of the Buddhist monks, there was this Buddhist monk who is considered to be the happiest person in the world. Their internal states are the ones which are more meaningful, and they are in tune with the rest of the cosmic, whatever, belief system.
Interesting. Praveen, very tempting question, and in my webinar segment, I normally call this as the angry young man question. And here comes the angry young man question. Question is, HR is always in this catch-22 situation about whether it's a business decision or an emotional decision or a HR decision. Why is that? I mean, are these two different things? What, man question.
Of course. I think we cannot deny that we live in a world of numbers, money, and greed. Capitalism does work. And HR is given the blunt end of, having to fire people. You sometimes are told, sack this 300 people one fine morning and you get this pink slip or whatever it's called in American related companies.
Right.
So, and you were told, nobody's there, but say, get these guys out of the building, take their ID cards and their laptops. What a disgraceful way of sending an employee. And how bad you should feel to do that even. Agar kisi ko bhejna hai, do it gracefully.
Right.
Do it with dignity and respect. I'm sorry, mate, I really cannot do it. Or don't get a security guy, escort this guy outside the building so that he doesn't jump off the window, lock the windows. Kya ho raha hai?
Right.
So this huge idea of, treating people like a piece of paper, you use it when you want to and then bin it, I think that's disgraceful for any organization. Yes, organizations depend on money and you'll have to pay your bills, and organizations need to survive to employ more people. Organizations cannot die. It's not fair for organizations to die, but do it meaningfully. If you have to fire, izzat ke saath karo.
Very well. I mean, so these are not two sides of the coin. Business and emotion, they are same side of the coin. And actually, you're saying that business decision executed with emotion in it, in your heart. I think very well articulated.
They have a wife and kids, and they have families too. And when this guy goes out, I think he'll have friends. He goes out, has a good time, and he'll feel sad. He'll feel happy. I think we're not dealing with chatbots.
Interesting. Well, still have about 10 minutes, and I have one more tempting question coming up. There's some numbers mentioned there, so allow me to look at it closely. Well, it says that today, if you look at the managers, the people managers time log, 75% of the time is going into really managing his or her subordinates. 15% of the time is going in leading them, and rest of it is coaching. The question is, with the right mix of the high tech and high touch, the technology and the touch aspect of HR, can we reduce the people managers' time from managing and put that time into really leading and coaching? Is it possible?
It's a fantastic space. That's when actually you need to embrace technology. Technology is a great slave, but a bad master. As long as you're in control, as long as I don't have to have a one-to-one meeting with my, junior or my employee to say oh, you got 30% raise or 12% raise. I think he can look at his own performance indices online. He can submit things online. But when emotional spaces are needed, like this coaching, growth, and understanding, leadership, I think that's where one-to-one spaces are needed. I think when technology is embraced right, can do all this mundane jobs and this, what you call brisk, thoughtless jobs sometimes.
Wonderful. Praveen, today, gone are the days where people are trying to compete with customer experience. That's given. Whereas people are now started competing on employee experiences. Now we're talking about doing a right mix of technology and touch. Question is, how will we deliver the best and world-class employee experiences in this stage where we are actually witnessing the consumerization, where employees are rating companies like, you and me, before getting into a hotel, we do a Zomato and check the reviews.
Yes.
Today we have employees rating companies. So in this experience economy, how HR can use a good mix of high tech and high touch?
The other day I had a young man who came in who was about to get married, and he said up tak it was fine, sir, with this company X, but as far as a married man's life is concerned, company Y provides a better space where I can have a meaningful married life. When I was young, I was having fun. This was fine because I could do perhaps 60 hours and I could go home whenever I wanted to, and I could sleep at work. And they had all this, right from ping pong to golf courses within the organization. So I could sleep in the organization, go. Now I'm married. I want something else. I want to go to some other place. So if organizations can look at the life cycle of the individual and also the emotional needs as individuals transit from one phase to another. So perhaps an organization is better when you have children, they have a better child protection plan, or they might have a better health protection plan, or they might have great relationships at work and outside work. So perhaps a global perspective of individual's life cycle as well as organizational life cycle, when they go parallel together, I think that's when a meaningful engagement happens. And that's when things will happen. But saying that, it's like a tank which fills from one end and flows out from the other end. So people come with different ages and different needs, different perspectives. So it's difficult to provide for everyone, but at least most of the people in a graceful way. I think that's the key.
Wonderful. Uh, uh, we know Hyderabad, Hyderabad time is typically a topic and when we talk about being punctual. We said Hyderabadis are late, but we have been having some interesting questions come from audience, and I can see now as we're approaching towards the end of this webinar, questions are just piling up. I have to really pick something very interesting and a tempting question. It says. Should the CHRO's designation should be changed as Chief Belief Officer?
I mean, it'll be interesting to, look at the definitional issues of Chief HR Officer, because the relationships are changing. Relationships do not mean that HR has to sit in when I'm hiring a managerial post, or HR has to sit in when I'm firing somebody, or HR has to sit in when I'm giving an appraisal. It's much more than HR being part of the narrative, being part of the story, being part of, how should I say, creating that sense of identity and my existence in the current world. So belief says, Ada, my HR is my partner. So I'd say chief partnering person, chief partner in my life, because I spend much of my life at work. So I would say HR should be like, teller.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Another that comes to our mind is really, and this has been my personal question too. Whenever we expect employees to stretch at work, we often have witnessed that, where do they take that extra hour from which bucket? Irony is that particular hour, if I need to really think about that additional hour, that happens to be coming from the bucket called the socialization bucket. An alarming. Do you have any prescription for HR that when employees are stretching at work, ensure that it is not pulled out of the socialization bucket? Praveen.
I think the socialization has become very transactional actually, because people, when they come and work at a certain place, they've been working, doing X amount of work, and the socialization, the assumption of socialization is like everybody goes out for a drink, has a little chat, and then say like, thank you very much, goodbye. That's considered a socialization space. And then people like, go on block from teams, like, 20 members from team X will go and then do this socialization thing, or 20 members from this team X will go and do this building exercise. And this part, like, people assume that an organization has to do this to build the team spirit and again contribute to the bottom line. And socialization means a bit more, and wherein you have a meaningful relationship with people around, and you feel a part of the community or feel a part of the whole process. Yes, socialization time is the one which gets sacrificed first. But unfortunately, I think the reality of the thing is that we all are forced to work beyond our contracted hours. And that's unfortunately the nature of things. And two, when we do get this thing, we forget to pause. I work, I come back, and I'll have to, socialize, because I have to socialize.
Right.
I'll have to do this meditation yoga because I'll have to meditate. There is a meaning, there is a purpose. Like, I want to be like that cow in the pasture, does nothing, has its thing. I don't think it's really meditating to go to, or a deer in the forest. It's still alert, it's waiting. If there is a tiger around, it's ready to jump and run. But it's in that sensory motor readiness, as we call it. You are in that space where you're pausing everything, including your thoughts. And that would be the true space I want to keep intact. I wouldn't mind socialization and other spaces occasionally going wrong. The need of the hour, and that's how, and we'll have to grow.
We're coming towards the end of the seminar, but This is again what I call a angry young man question that has come up. It says that, wired workplace, I mean, even otherwise, all of us as human beings are subject to so many devices throughout our, since we get up in the morning till we go to bed, we are exposed to so many devices. Why HR should be an exception? We just on the chatbots. That's an angry young man question.
I think you should go all out on chatbots, provided you still remain human. You cannot take humanity out of HR thing. You still continue to remain human. And chatbots are enablers. They're not your masters. Don't let them do the thinking and feeling for you. Let them work for you. Make them work like whatever you want to. Let them be a workhorse of the system. Let them work like donkeys. That's fine. Chatbots, they are there to work and help you be a better human in the human resources. So don't take away the humanity out of the human resources.
Wonderful, Praveen. Well, come to an end, and this webinar is not an exception. And as not housekeeping, but it's my duty to thank the organizers, Freethinkers Adda, the leadership team, and two names I must mention, Mr. Vivekananda from Tranquil Minds and Abhilasha from the Freethinkers Adda for ensuring that we all witness a smooth session. And last but not the least, you, wonderful audience, and I just hope, I know that it's 4:30 on a Friday evening, and you're all waiting for to make a good weekend. And like they say that even eagles need a push. We at Free Thinkers Adda believe that this particular webinar has actually given you a gentle push to start your journey for your HR function and ensure that we believe by this statement, which is we are going to use a right combination of high tech and high touch. So please keep watching this webinar series. See you soon. And till then, you have a good weekend ahead of you. Bye for now. Thank you. Thanks, Praveen.
For watching everyone out there.